When we compare the political map of the late 19th century, that means the years between 1870 and 1890, we see that Europe looks like today when we just look at the oceans. The Baltic Sea, the Northern Sea, the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. But on the other hand, in the political map, there are a lot of differences. Maybe first you realize there are some countries missing, some essential countries that we know from today's map, like Poland. Where the heck is Poland on this map? Or Croatia, the Baltic states, or even Finland is not on the map. On the other hand, some countries are much bigger than they are today. We are going to speak about the reasons why some countries are missing and others are much bigger than today. Our first task is to label the map. And we start with these red islands in the Northern Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. So this is the United Kingdom, of course. And in blue, below or southbound from the United Kingdom, we have the Republic of France. So while the United Kingdom, Great Britain, was a kingdom, so reigned by a king and a parliament, France was a republic without a king after the defeat by the German troops in 1871. So it was the third French Republic, and the Emperor Napoleon III had to leave the country. We continue with Italy, which was a kingdom back then too. So until the end of the First World War, Italy was a kingdom. Yes. Okay, and then we realize, Russia was very big back then, as it is today. But it isn't a confederation, or it wasn't a confederation and not a democracy. Back then it was an empire reigned by the Tsar. So like the German Kaiser, there was an emperor in Russia as well, and he was called the Tsar. By the way, it was the cousin of the German emperor, but we are going to speak about that, these special relationships in the next lessons. Okay, so that's the Russian Empire. And then we have the German expression. It was not the Federal Republic of Germany, of course. We see the borders are much different, but it was an empire too, with an emperor at the top of the state, the German Kaiser, or Kaiser of Germany. And last but not least, we have a very big country in the center, or in the southern center of Europe, which isn't existing anymore, and that is an empire as well. And you know which one? It is the Empire of Austro-Hungary, or Austria-Hungary, as we can call it too. Okay, so those were the states. Austro-Hungary, consisting of parts of Romania, Hungary and Austria, of course, Croatia, big parts of today's Serbia, Bosnia, and Slovenia, the Czech Republic, and so on. Yes. So we see those countries had in common, so the German Empire, the Empire of Austro-Hungary, and the Russian Empire, they had in common that they were big empires over lots of different people, different cultures, different languages, like the Finns and the Baltic states with their own cultures and with their own languages, like Poland on the place or on the area of the German Empire, as well as on the area of the Russian Empire, the Ukraines, Belarus, and the countries and people I have talked about in on the space of the Empire of Austro-Hungary. Okay, so that about the labeling of the map. Now we can distinguish between the different nations here. And our task was to look at the different alliances that the German Chancellor Bismarck formed. So to do that, we just look slightly on our, or briefly on our worksheet, which is here. And at the bottom of it, we see it labeled. It started only a few months or years after the German victory over the French kingdom, that Bismarck tried to isolate France. That was one of his biggest goals. As you pointed out successfully, the French desire of taking revenge over the Germans was very big, of course. So those German provocations of celebrating every year the victory over their neighbor in the West remembered the French people that there was their special enemy in the East, and they wanted to take revenge. They wanted to take back the lost countries, and of course, yes. So you have figured that out successfully on your own. So Bismarck saw that too. He realized it maybe wasn't the best idea to provoke the French like that. And to keep peace in Europe, he tried to isolate the French by making alliances with the other powers. So I think Bismarck's biggest fear was that Russia and France could form an alliance and become a threat to the German Empire from both sides. So in the first years after the French defeat or after the German victory, he tried to form alliances with Austria and Russia. And so those alliances were renewed in the next years again. So the first was a triangular between the Russian Empire, the German Empire, and the Empire of Austro-Hungary. Fun fact, all of those countries were empires and were not democracies. So, and in 1881, that Three Emperors League was renewed. So that is the first big alliance that we have to label in the map. Okay, the second one followed in the year after that, and that was the Triple Alliance between the German Empire, the Empire of Austro-Hungary, and the Kingdom of Italy. And that was a bit strange because on the one hand, Germany had an alliance now with the Russians, but also with Italy and Austro-Hungary. So what about a Russian attack on Italy, for example? Yeah. So how would the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians react in that case? So that was the Triple Alliance, because there were three nations involved. And lastly, we had Bismarck realized that thought too. So what if we come between Austro-Hungary and the Russian Empire? So the Russian fear of being isolated as well was addressed by Bismarck. when he formed a special alliance between the Russian Empire and the German Empire, and that was the Reinsurance Treaty. So to reinsure that those countries were friends and would stay close to each other.